Shalom Aleichem, welcome to Chabad and Friends. Today we'll talk a little bit about the relationship between the Satmar Rebbe and the previous Rebbe of Lubavitch, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok, and our Rebbe, and overall the Hasidic movements of Satmar and Lubavitch. I've written extensively about this in my book Satmar and Lubavitch, so most of what I'm going to say now is there and much more, and I encourage you to read that work. But the Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum of Satmar came to America in 1946, Rosh Hashanah 46, and shortly thereafter he stayed with Feish Moskowitz in Crown Heights, and then moved over, I believe, during the Aseres Yemei Tshuva to Williamsburg, and was there the rest of his life. When he was in Crown Heights, they say that he had a chance to meet with the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok, like I said in the previous clip, with the Baba Rav, the Baba Rebbe, Reb Shlomo Halberstam, that it was the style at the time that the Hungarian and Polish and other Hasidic groups and their leaders didn't, they met with the previous Rebbe, even though this was a Lubavitch Rebbe. They were Satmar, they were Lubavitch, they were Kloisenberg, they were Mozhitz, they were Amshinov, they were Novominsk and Kapishnitz. It made no difference. When the holy person at Tzaddik is in town and he has what to offer, they came running. They came, to talk, to discuss. It was post-Holocaust and people were very, very down. And they lost their families, and they lost their Hasidim, and they lost their movement. It was a very tough time. And the Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok, the Frierdiker Rebbe, gave everyone encouragement to continue. So the story goes that the Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, the Satmar Rebbe, went into the previous Rebbe, and he said to him something to the effect that the reason the Holocaust took place was because of the great assimilation in Europe at the time. And the Frierdiker Rebbe turned to him and he said, "Medarf nicht machen Gott gerecht." We don't need to justify God's action in the Holocaust. In other words, whatever Hashem does, He does. Of course, it comes from God. But to go and to blame to blame the Jews for their transgressions of the time, and that's the cause for the Holocaust, the previous Rebbe said it's the wrong approach. Another thing that comes to mind is that the newspaper that the Satmar Rav bought, the Yid, the editor became Rebbe Uriel Zimmer. And Rebbe Uriel Zimmer, although he was a passionate kanoi, a zealot, and an anti-Zionist, and a Satmar Chassid, and a Torah Karta Chassid, nevertheless, he met the Rebbe, and he became a chassid of the Lubavitch Rebbe. And I was told by someone who was with him the last 2 weeks of his life, he passed away in England, and he passed away on Yud Kislev, and he asked the person to sing the song of the Mittler Rebbe, knowing that it's the Yom HaGeula of the second Lubavitch Rebbe, Reb Dovber, and there is a certain beautiful song that Chabad Hasidim sing. And he asked him to sing it, knowing farewell that he's going to shortly pass away. And he sang the niggin. So I asked this person who's a kanoi himself, a staunch Satmar, Natura Karta supporter. He's my neighbor in Borough Park, and I asked him if Rebbe Uriel Zimmer was indeed a Lubavitch chassid. And he said, absolutely. Notwithstanding his relationship with the Satmar Rav and being the editor of the Yid and everything else, and being kanoi and writing a kuntris, a pamphlet about Tznius in the extreme form, nevertheless, his soul was bound to the Rebbe. So here we see a very interesting phenomenon. Here is an individual who has allegiance to two tzaddikim, both the Satmar Rav and the Rebbe, and many conversations between the Rebbe and himself involved discussions about things that he discussed with the Satmar Rav and the Satmar Shita. And at the very same time, he was transformed to the point where he was completely a Lubavitch chassid. And finally, in the 1960s, when the Rebbe said, I believe it was 1963, the Rebbe said when President Zalman Shazar became the president of Israel, and the Rebbe quoted a Chazal that when someone is Oil Legdula, when someone ascends to greatness, all their transgressions are forgiven. And this brought Satmar and the Satmar Rebbe Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum to a halt. He was very upset, and his people wanted to demonstrate and protest and make a big tararam, and the Satmar Rav said no. Although he personally was kind of attacked, and he was, as we say in Yiddish, ois mensch. He was really bothered. But to go and protest and make a big to-do, he said no. The Rebbe later at the next Fabrengen, I believe, he explained himself, and later in Yechidus, he explained it to someone else as well. The episodes of the 1970s, which are accounted for and explained and written about in my book at length, is a discussion for itself. But in brief, it did not come from the Satmar Rebbe himself. It came from people around him, people who were rabble-rousers and troublemakers at the time, and now they regret what they did. And Hashem pardons them as long as they do a tshuva amiti, a true return and regret for their actions. And today, so many years later, there are good relationships between the Satmar Chassidim and Lubavitch Chassidim, and I believe in many fundamental issues, not in all, but in many fundamental issues, there's a commonality.